My brother's room was always loud, blasting music, laughter, the sound of half-finished jokes between guys who thought the world was theirs. Mine, in contrast, was a sanctuary of quiet clicks and shifting pixels, a place where the real world slipped away, replaced by fantasy quests and digital skies. I never expected those two worlds to cross, and certainly not the way they did. It was a Tuesday, ordinary, forgettable. I had my headset on, deep into a mission that required precision and speed. My fingers moved instinctively, body tense with focus. The game demanded my full attention, until a creak behind me pulled me out of the trance. I turned. Ray stood there. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was my brother's best friend, the one who joked too loudly, whose cologne filled the hallway before he even spoke. We'd exchanged maybe 5 words in the past 2 years, mostly grunts or nods of mutual disinterest. But now, for reasons I didn't understand, he was standing just inside my doorway, watching me. I froze. The controller slipped slightly in my hand. "Didn't know you were that into it," he said, voice casual but eyes too focused. I expected a smirk, a laugh, some teasing jab, the kind my brother always delivered when he caught me gaming. But Ray just watched. He stepped in, not fully, just a few feet closer. I could feel him studying me, or maybe the way I gripped the controller, the concentration still lingering on my face. "You're good," he said, nodding toward the screen. That looked intense. I blinked. Compliments weren't a currency we traded in this house, least of all from someone like him. My heart beat a little faster, not from nerves, but confusion. He didn't mock. He didn't invade. He simply observed, like I was something unfamiliar. Then, just as quietly, he stepped back. "Didn't mean to interrupt," he added, almost gently, and disappeared down the hall. The room felt different after he left, like he'd shifted, something without touching a single thing. I stared at the paused screen, the digital battle waiting for my return, but the urgency had vanished. All I could think about was the way his voice had dropped at the end, how his gaze had lingered, not on the game, but on me. It should have meant nothing, a glance, a stray moment in a quiet house. But something had changed, something I couldn't name. And even as I returned to the game, forcing my hands to move, a part of me stayed behind, in the doorway, where he'd stood. I didn't know it yet, but that moment was a doorway itself, and I'd already stepped through. After that afternoon, things shifted in ways too subtle to name, but too deliberate to ignore. Ray began showing up more often, sometimes without my brother, claiming he'd forgotten his hoodie or left something behind. Other times he'd arrive early, lingering in the hallway before my brother even noticed he was home. And more, he ended up in my doorway. He never pushed, never stepped fully inside, just hovered, asking innocent questions that didn't feel so innocent. "What game's that? How long did it take you to get that good? You always play alone?" His voice carried no sarcasm, just quiet interest, like he genuinely wanted to understand this part of my world. And slowly, I let him in. By the end of the week, he wasn't just watching, he was sitting beside me, awkwardly holding a second controller. He was clumsy at first, terrible at combos and always missing cues, but he didn't laugh it off, or quit. He stayed, fumbled, tried again. It felt strange, not just his presence, but the effort he was putting in. No one ever tried to meet me in my world before, not like that. "You're patient," he said one night, after I guided him. "Through a particularly brutal level. I get why you like this. Feels like the only place that listens." That line stayed with me longer than I expected. Ray, always the loudest in the room, admitting he needed silence, admitting something he probably wouldn't say in front of my brother. He began to talk more when it was just us. Nothing dramatic, little admissions tucked between loading screens and respawn timers. About how exhausting it was pretending to be the guy everyone expected. How he sometimes wanted to disappear. How he felt seen in my room in a way he didn't anywhere else. And I started to feel something grow in the quiet between his words. It wasn't a crush, not exactly. It was deeper than that, softer. Like the beginning of a melody you didn't know you'd been waiting to hear. I began noticing things I shouldn't. The way his voice dipped when he was tired. The way his hand brushed mine as he reached for the controller. It never felt accidental, but it never lingered long enough to be obvious. One evening, as I was showing him a new campaign, he paused mid-mission, eyes fixed not on the screen, but on me. "You're not like the others," he said. "With you, I don't have to lie." The words echoed in the small space between us. I couldn't breathe for a moment. Not from shock, but recognition. Something inside me responded, unspoken but alive. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. I saved the game and turned off the console. For the first time, silence wasn't an escape. It was a promise. The text came late, too late for casual plans. "You up? Come to the garage." No emoji, no explanation, just that. But my heart was already racing before I finished reading it. I slipped out quietly, past my brother's closed door, down the stairs, through the cool hush of midnight air. The garage was dimly lit, one overhead bulb flickering like it couldn't decide whether to die or stay alive. Ray was there, sitting on the old couch, elbows on knees, eyes locked on the floor like it held answers. He looked up when I entered. Said nothing at first. "I couldn't sleep," he finally murmured, voice rougher than usual. "Didn't know who else to talk to." I sat beside him, the space between us heavy with everything we hadn't said. The silence stretched, not awkward but loaded. He didn't look at me, not right away. When he did, it was all there in his eyes. Tension, want, fear. "I feel like I'm two people," he whispered, "and with you. I forget which one I'm supposed to be." He leaned in before I could speak. The kiss was soft, cautious, like he was testing the air between us for fire. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. Everything I'd kept buried under logic and doubt unraveled in an instant. My hands found his shoulders. His fingers brushed my jaw. It felt real, raw and trembling and sacred. When we pulled apart, he looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "This stays between us," he said gently. "Just for now, okay?" I nodded, breathless. It made sense. My brother couldn't know. The world outside my room couldn't know. But in that moment, none of that mattered. I didn't need a label. I didn't need forever. I just needed this. We stayed in that quiet pocket of the night a while longer, talking in hushed tones. He told me how long he'd been hiding, how tired he was of pretending, how easy it was to be real with me. By the time I slipped back into my room, my whole body buzzed, not just from the kiss, but the possibility of something new, something ours. But the next morning, possibility died. I passed by the living room on my way to the kitchen. My brother was there. So was Ray. They were laughing. "He really believed me?" Ray chuckled. "Didn't think it'd be that easy." I stopped cold, hidden behind the wall. My stomach turned, blood roaring in my ears. My brother laughed back. "Told you he'd fall for it." They didn't see me. Didn't hear the sound of something breaking that wasn't made of glass. The night before had been truth to me. To them, it had been sport. And in that moment I realized love wasn't the thing I'd tasted in that kiss. It was the thing stolen from me when I wasn't looking. I didn't cry right away. That would have made it feel too real, too irreversible. Instead, I stood there, spine pressed to the wall like I was part of the house itself, listening to the sound of two voices laughing over what, to me, had been something sacred. The warmth from the night before, the stolen moment, the kiss I'd memorized in my bones, curled into something cold and hollow. Later, when the house emptied and the silence returned, I sat in my room, the controller resting on my lap like a relic from another life. The screen blinked, asking if I wanted to resume. I didn't. I couldn't. The game had lost its weight, its magic, its quiet comfort. I kept replaying their voices, the smugness, the cruelty, and most of all, his. The way he'd looked at me, said I was different, that I was the only place. He didn't have to lie. The irony cut deeper than any blade. Maybe he hadn't lied. Maybe in some twisted corner of his world, it had been real for a second. But he'd sold it out the next morning, tossed it like a secret punchline. When he came back later that day alone again, he knocked, waited like he always did. My heart stuttered once, but I didn't move. "Hey," he said softly. "Can we talk?" His voice was familiar, but the spell had broken. I opened the door slowly, met his eyes. He looked nervous, hopeful even, like someone about to explain away a mistake. But I didn't want explanations. I wanted honesty, and I'd already seen the truth. "You got what you wanted," I said, steady but low. "Hope it was worth it." His face paled. "Wait, you heard us?" I didn't blink. Every word. Ray stepped forward, mouth opening like he had more to say, some desperate justification ready to fall from his lips. But I raised a hand and stopped him. "I don't need a reason," I said. "I just needed you not to be a lie." He stood there helpless, maybe even ashamed, but shame doesn't undo betrayal. It doesn't put shattered trust back together or scrub laughter from poisoned memories. Without another word, I closed the door. This time, for good. That night, I picked up the controller again. Not to escape, but to reclaim something. My space, my silence, the version of me that didn't need anyone to validate his world. The screen lit up, casting a soft glow across the room. And for the first time in days, it felt right. I played alone. I breathed easier. Because love, real love, doesn't mock behind walls. It doesn't use vulnerability as a dare. And somewhere, out there, maybe it waits, quiet, honest, and not afraid to stay.